When Archimedes is mentioned, the image that springs to mind is that of a genius whose insightful thoughts grasped the workings of the universe long before modern science existed in its current form. His name has become synonymous with how the boundless potential of the human mind can overcome seemingly insurmountable limits. But who was this legendary thinker whose innovative discoveries have stood the test of millennia and continue to inspire awe? Archimedes was born around 287 BC in Syracuse, a thriving Greek city-state located on the picturesque island of Sicily. During that era, Syracuse was a significant cultural and scientific center where advanced ideas from the Hellenic world were exchanged. The city's life was full of striking contrasts, presenting a vibrant mosaic. On one hand, it was a developed trading port, bustling with life, lively philosophical debates, and refined works of art, pleasing to the eye. On the other hand, the city, occupying a strategically important position, was often a target for attacks and became embroiled in bloody wars. It was probably this duality, the combination of high art and looming danger, that largely shaped Archimedes' unique view of the world, where theoretical research always went hand in hand with practical application. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. There are many more interesting videos ahead, and we will continue. Archimedes lived in a historical era when science was just beginning to tentatively explore the fundamentals of the universe, taking its first steps. Before him, great philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle speculated about the mysteries of nature, but rarely supported their conclusions with concrete calculations or carefully planned experiments. Archimedes, on the other hand, was the person who not only contemplated and reflected, but also actively acted, created new mechanisms, conducted meticulous tests, and successfully applied his discoveries in practice, demonstrating their validity. This is what makes him unique. He was not only an outstanding scientific thinker, but also a talented engineer with the ability to turn his bold ideas into tangible reality. Syracuse, his hometown, played an exceptional role in his development as a scientist. The city was under the wise rule of King Hero II, known as a generous patron of science and art, fostering their development. Archimedes often worked under the patronage of Hero, finding solutions not only for abstract theoretical problems, but also for issues of paramount practical importance to the well-being of the city and its residents. King Hero II, unconditionally recognizing Archimedes' outstanding talent, entrusted him with solving the most complex and critical tasks, from constructing reliable defensive structures designed to protect the city to conducting a thorough examination of the honesty of jewelers crafting items for the royal court. It is this story that later formed the basis of the famous Eureka legend, which will be discussed later. For his time, Archimedes was somewhat of a visionary, ahead of his era and anticipating the scientific discoveries of the future. His scientific works are not merely dry, emotionless calculations, but genuine works of art, imbued with an unquenchable thirst for knowledge and a desire for exploration. He wrote inspired treatises on numbers, intricate formulas, and fundamental physical principles, thereby laying a solid foundation for future generations of scientists, inspiring them to new achievements. Archimedes deeply understood that science is not just a collection of abstract ideas floating in the air, but a powerful tool with the ability to transform the world, making it better and more convenient for life. His multifaceted figure is a unique bridge connecting ancient philosophy with modern science, which is in constant development. He laid the basic principles that, centuries later, were successfully used by such outstanding scientists as Copernicus, Galileo, and Newton. Looking at the impressive achievements of Archimedes, one cannot help but wonder how a person who lived more than 2,000 years ago was able to achieve such a deep level of understanding of the workings of the surrounding world. Perhaps the secret lies in his boundless curiosity, insatiable thirst for knowledge, and unwavering desire to explain even the most complex and mysterious phenomena that defy explanation. For Archimedes, there was no concept of impossible, but only a task awaiting its solution, no matter how difficult and insurmountable it seemed. Archimedes was a man with an amazing ability to turn a simple idea into something grandiose and mind-boggling. We have already seen that he thought big, not limiting himself to the usual framework, but there is one catchphrase that most vividly and accurately reflects his unique approach to science and life in general. "Give me a place to stand, and I will move the earth." This legendary quote is not just beautiful words intended for admiration, but a true manifesto of his genius, revealing the essence of his thinking. At first glance, this phrase may seem incredible, even audacious and presumptuous, but Archimedes was well aware of what he was saying. He was referring to the lever, a simple but ingenious device that, when the fulcrum is positioned correctly, can move objects significantly exceeding the weight of the person using it. If you increase the length of the lever and find a solid base, its capabilities become almost limitless, allowing you to do incredible things. This is what Archimedes was all about. He carefully studied the laws of physics and saw in them not annoying limitations, but enormous opportunities waiting to be unlocked. But this famous phrase is not just a statement of the possibilities of mechanics, but an expression of Archimedes' particular way of thinking, his approach to solving problems. He sincerely believed that any problem has a solution, no matter how complex and tangled its knot may seem. You just need to find that very fulcrum, that coveted key that will open the way to its resolution. It was this exceptional ability to find simple but elegant answers to complex questions that inspired people not only in his era, but also throughout many subsequent centuries. Archimedes vividly demonstrated that knowledge is a powerful force capable of transforming the world, and the lever he invented became not only a symbol of an important physical discovery, but also an entire philosophy. If you have the right tool in your hands and a solid foundation, you are capable of achieving any, even the most ambitious, goal. Archimedes was born in a city that was itself a vivid embodiment of indomitable energy, continuous forward movement, and advanced science. Syracuse in the 3rd century BC was not just an ordinary Greek polis. It was one of the most significant and influential centers of Hellenic civilization, where important trade routes, diverse cultures, and outstanding minds striving for knowledge lively intersected. It was a place where advanced ideas did not just float in the air, remaining only abstract concepts, but became an integral part of everyday life, organically woven into its fabric. Life in Syracuse was characterized by intensity and dynamism. The narrow streets, lined with small houses skillfully decorated with ceramics, constantly buzzed with the noise and bustle of crowds of people hurrying about their business. In the bustling port, ships from all corners of the Mediterranean docked, bringing exotic goods, wondrous rarities, and fresh, exciting news from distant lands. Here you could meet enterprising merchants from distant Egypt, experienced sailors from mysterious Crete, and talented craftsmen from thriving Carthage. People from different parts of the world exchanged not only valuable goods, but also knowledge, enriching each other culturally and intellectually. These noisy scenes of trade and communication probably surrounded young Archimedes from an early age, shaping his insatiable curiosity and irresistible passion for learning how the surrounding world is arranged and what laws govern it. However, Syracuse was not just about thriving trade and exquisite luxury. The city occupied a strategically important position, which made it an attractive target for enemy attacks, eager to seize its wealth and influence. This circumstance forced residents to pay special attention to strengthening their defenses to protect their home from external encroachments. The best engineers of their time worked on the construction of powerful fortress walls and the creation of advanced military machines, investing all their knowledge and skills in this important task. One can only imagine how little Archimedes, full of curiosity, stood somewhere at the foot of the city wall and watched with admiration the work of these skilled craftsmen, who seemed to easily turn rough stone and ordinary wood into real wonders of engineering, causing delight. Perhaps it was at that moment that the first images of complex mechanisms began to form in his young head, which would later bring him worldwide fame and recognition. Syracuse was not only a place where complex machines were created to defend the city from enemies, but also a recognized intellectual center that attracted scientists and philosophers from all over the Hellenic world. During that era, philosophy and science in Greece reached an incredible flourishing, experiencing a period of their highest ascent. Just a few decades before the birth of Archimedes, the great Euclid wrote his famous Elements, one of the most influential and significant scientific works in the history of mathematics, which had a huge impact on its further development. These innovative works had already become widely distributed throughout the Greek world at that time and became the basis for training new generations of scientists, passing on knowledge to them and inspiring new discoveries. The city was constantly engaged in lively discussions about the nature of things, the mysterious movement of the stars, and the complex structure of the universe, involving everyone who was interested in science. Archimedes grew up in an atmosphere imbued with advanced ideas that inspired great discoveries and encouraged a relentless search for truth. Greek science at that time was closely intertwined with practical applications, representing more than just theoretical pursuits detached from reality. For instance, mathematics was successfully employed to create intricate architectural structures, astonishing in their beauty and grandeur, as well as to design effective siege engines intended for warfare. In such a favorable environment, it was simply impossible to remain untouched by science, to not experience its influence personally. From a very young age, Archimedes could observe how ideas put forth by philosophers and scientists were being transformed into tangible realities, benefiting society. Perhaps this is why, from the outset, he did not separate theory and practice, but perceived them as inseparable parts of a unified whole, complementing each other. Life in Syracuse successfully combined everything necessary for the complete development of a person: a vibrant and eventful daily life, intellectual sophistication, and the constant challenge of survival in difficult conditions. For a child with such a sharp mind and insatiable curiosity as Archimedes, this was the ideal place to develop his talents and abilities. He could observe how enterprising merchants meticulously calculated their profits, experienced engineers created complex water systems supplying the city with water, and respected philosophers engaged in endless debates about what the world is made of and how it is structured. All of this gradually laid a solid foundation for the future genius who would one day change the course of history with his outstanding discoveries. It is easy to imagine how young Archimedes, inspired by everything happening around him, began to ask probing questions. Why do ships float so confidently on the surface of the water and not sink? How do those gigantic catapults, which tower over the town square, inspiring fear in enemies, work? What are the scholars doing with those strange circles and lines that they carefully draw on the sand, trying to comprehend the mysteries of the universe? It was these naive yet profound questions that became the starting point of his great scientific journey, on which he would reveal to the world laws that no one even suspected existed, revolutionizing people's understanding of the universe. After a productive childhood spent in Syracuse, Archimedes went to Alexandria, recognized as the largest scientific and cultural center of that time, attracting the best scientists and thinkers from around the world. This magnificent city, founded by the great Alexander the Great and successfully developed by the Ptolemaic dynasty, became a place where the most outstanding minds of the Hellenistic world gathered, exchanging knowledge and experience. Alexandria was a truly unique city, as it surprisingly concentrated the knowledge and advanced technologies of various cultures: Egyptian, Greek, Persian, and even distant Indian. For the young and knowledge-seeking Archimedes, this was an invaluable opportunity not only to thoroughly study the works of the great thinkers of the past, but also to share his fresh ideas with leading contemporary scientists who had come to Alexandria from all over the world. Alexandria was famous for its legendary library, which was rightfully considered the largest and richest repository of knowledge in the entire ancient world, attracting scientists and researchers. Its vast collection housed thousands of priceless papyri and artfully crafted manuscripts covering a wide range of knowledge, from philosophy and mathematics to medicine and astronomy, encompassing virtually all known sciences of that era. It was a place where the wisdom of various civilizations came together, was meticulously organized, and was constantly replenished with new discoveries and knowledge, becoming accessible to all who sought it. Archimedes, arriving in this amazing city, gained unlimited access to invaluable works that largely shaped his worldview and laid a solid foundation for his future outstanding discoveries, which immortalized his name through the ages. But the famous library was only part of Alexandria's developed scientific infrastructure, which promoted the development of science and education. The city was home to the renowned Museum, a unique research institute and prestigious educational institution where the best scientists of the time passionately studied nature, conducted complex experiments, and freely exchanged their revolutionary ideas, contributing to scientific progress. Within the walls of the museum, lively conversations and scientific debates were constantly taking place, which undoubtedly contributed to the emergence of new discoveries and breakthroughs in various fields of knowledge. The most outstanding minds of his time gathered here, and young Archimedes had the unique opportunity to learn from the best of the best, adopting their knowledge and experience. One of the key moments of his education was his encounter with the fundamental works of Euclid, whose Elements had by that time rightfully gained the status of the primary textbook on geometry, being mandatory for study by all who were interested in this science. Archimedes deeply and comprehensively studied this fundamental work, which systematized the accumulated knowledge of lines, planes, various geometric figures, and their numerous properties, laying the foundations for the further development of science. This acquired knowledge not only strengthened his long-standing interest in mathematics, but also became an important starting point for his future innovative research in the field of geometry and mechanics, opening up new horizons for him. Archimedes perceived Euclid's ideas not as ready-made answers that could not be questioned, but as an interesting challenge that needed to be developed and expanded, moving further into the unknown. In addition, in Alexandria, Archimedes became familiar with the works of other prominent scientists who were engaged in mechanics and physics, broadening his horizons. For example, Ctesibius, one of the first talented inventors of hydraulic devices, was actively working on creating water clocks that could accurately measure time and efficient pumps for pumping water. His innovative works could undoubtedly have inspired Archimedes to conduct his own research in the field of hydrostatics, which would later lead to the discovery of the famous Archimedes principle bearing his name. In Alexandria, advanced astronomical ideas were also actively discussed, which probably awakened in Archimedes a keen interest in studying celestial bodies, their mysterious movements, and the secrets of the structure of planets revolving around the sun. Studying in Alexandria allowed Archimedes to fully develop his outstanding natural abilities, but it also provided him with a unique opportunity to connect with people who set ambitious goals for themselves and strive to achieve them. These were not just armchair theorists, detached from real life, but people who were engaged in solving specific problems facing society, protecting cities from attacks, improving agricultural methods, creating new, more advanced technologies that make life easier. Archimedes fully adopted this practical approach to science, which would later become an important and integral part of his scientific activity, defining his future path. Returning from Alexandria to his native Syracuse, Archimedes was no longer the curious youth, full of hopes and aspirations, as he had left his father's house several years earlier. Now he was a mature scientist, possessing deep knowledge in the fields of mathematics, physics, and engineering, which allowed him to begin independent and fruitful research activities, bringing tangible results. Alexandria became for him that very fulcrum where his natural talent acquired a clear direction, and thoughts that had long remained only abstract ideas began to take concrete forms, being embodied in reality. After returning from Alexandria, Archimedes began to actively engage in mathematical and geometric research, manifesting his genius to the fullest extent. One of his greatest discoveries was the famous spiral, which now bears his name and is known as the Archimedean spiral, perpetuating his contribution to science. This was one of the first complex geometric figures described mathematically using precise formulas, and its unique properties have inspired scientists for many centuries, finding application in various fields of knowledge. To better understand what the Archimedean spiral is, imagine that you are drawing a line starting from one point, the center, and this line gradually spirals around this point, forming a characteristic spiral. At the same time, it is important to note that the distance between each turn of the spiral remains invariably the same, maintaining consistency. This means that as the spiral increases in size, each new turn is strictly defined and equidistant from the previous one, maintaining proportionality. If you simultaneously rotated a pen in a circle and moved it away from the center at a constant speed, you would certainly create this very Archimedean spiral, possessing unique mathematical properties. The Archimedean spiral was not just an interesting geometric object representing academic interest, but a real working tool for solving complex problems that arise in practice. Archimedes successfully used it to study and calculate the areas enclosed between the turns of the spiral, opening up new possibilities for mathematical calculations. In those distant times, this was an extremely difficult task, because at that time, there were simply no modern, well-developed calculation methods, such as integrals, that allow you to quickly and accurately solve such problems. Archimedes developed his own unique ways to find the areas of complex figures, and his innovative work in this direction became a solid foundation for further research in mathematics, inspiring scientists to new achievements. The practical significance of the Archimedean spiral he developed turned out to be extremely great, finding application in various fields. Its unique properties were soon successfully used in engineering and mechanics, creating new, more advanced mechanisms. For example, spiral pumps, designed for efficient lifting of water to a significant height, were inspired by this elegant geometric form. Such pumps were actively used in ancient times, and their operating principle may have been developed under the direct influence of Archimedes' innovative ideas, which were ahead of their time. The spiral also finds successful application in various mechanisms where uniform motion is particularly crucial, such as in gear systems that ensure a smooth transfer of rotation, or in screw designs that require precise movement. Even today, the fundamental principles embedded in the careful study of this elegant curve find widespread use in a wide variety of modern technologies, confirming Archimedes' brilliance. Archimedes made an invaluable contribution to the development of mathematics, developing innovative methods for calculating areas and volumes of complex geometric figures that actually foreshadowed the emergence of integral calculus, becoming its harbinger. To solve these complex problems, he successfully used his developed method of exhaustion, demonstrating his ingenuity and deep understanding of mathematical principles. This elegant method consisted of dividing a complex figure into many tiny parts with known geometric parameters, and then carefully adding their areas or volumes to obtain the overall characteristics of the figure. To calculate the area of a circle, Archimedes skillfully inscribed regular polygons within it, as well as describing polygons around the circle, striving for maximum accuracy. Gradually increasing the number of sides of the polygons, he achieved an increasingly accurate approximation of the true area of the circle, demonstrating his mathematical talent. As a result of these painstaking calculations, he convincingly proved that the area of a circle is equal to the product of the radius of the circle and half the length of its circumference, making an important discovery. Archimedes also worked fruitfully on calculating the volumes of various three-dimensional figures, demonstrating his mastery in geometry. He was able to show that the volume of a sphere is equal to 2/3 of the volume of the cylinder that surrounds it, provided that the height of the cylinder is equal to its diameter, establishing an important mathematical relationship. To do this, he mentally cut the figures into thin slices and carefully compared their volumes, arriving at the correct result. Archimedes considered this discovery to be one of the most significant and important in his life, rightly proud of it, and bequeathed to his descendants to depict a sphere and a cylinder on his tombstone to immortalize this achievement. In addition, Archimedes calculated the volumes of various cones and convincingly proved that the volume of a cone is exactly 1/3 of the volume of a cylinder with the same height and the same base, establishing another important geometric pattern. He also carefully studied the areas and volumes of other complex geometric figures, including parabolic segments, expanding the boundaries of mathematical science. Although in his era there was no modern theory of limits or integrals, in the form in which we know it today, Archimedes, using his innovative approach, actually applied the very same principles on which modern integral calculus is based, foreshadowing its appearance. His pioneering work laid a solid foundation for the future development of mathematics and served as a source of inspiration for modern scientists, such as the great Newton and Leibniz, who made enormous contributions to the development of science. One of the most famous and fascinating stories associated with the name of Archimedes concerns the crown of King Hero II, the ruler of Syracuse. Hero II, the wise ruler of Syracuse and generous patron of Archimedes, once commissioned a talented jeweler to create a magnificent crown of precious gold in the shape of an elegant laurel wreath, symbolizing power. The jeweler received a strictly defined amount of pure gold for this purpose, necessary for making the crown. But when the work was successfully completed, King Hero became suspicious that the dishonest craftsman might have secretly mixed a cheaper metal, such as silver, into the gold to profit. However, he did not want to damage the skillfully made crown in order to check its purity, as this could spoil its appearance. Therefore, Hero turned to Archimedes for help with a difficult task, to find out for sure whether the crown was really made of pure gold, as agreed, or whether the jeweler had deceived him by adding cheap impurities to it without destroying the crown itself. Archimedes pondered this difficult task long and hard, until one day, while taking a bath, he accidentally noticed that the water level rose noticeably when he submerged in it, displacing a certain volume of liquid. At that moment, it dawned on him, and he realized that the volume of water displaced was exactly equal to the volume of the body submerged in it, regardless of its shape and composition. This simple but brilliant principle could finally be successfully applied to the royal crown, allowing the jeweler's deception to be revealed. By measuring the volume of the crown using the displaced water and comparing its mass with the mass of an equal volume of pure gold, it was possible to determine with high accuracy whether the crown contained any undesirable impurities or whether it was indeed made of pure gold, as the jeweler claimed. Understanding the solution to the problem and realizing the full genius of his idea, Archimedes jumped out of the bath, overflowing with joy and delight, and shouted loudly, "Eureka!" which in ancient Greek means, "I have found it," and ran out into the streets of the city, forgetting even to get dressed from excitement to share his discovery with everyone. Although this colorful part of the story is probably somewhat exaggerated, it vividly highlights the incredible joy that a scientist experiences from making an important discovery, and emphasizes the scale of the discovery itself, which changed the perception of the world. Archimedes applied the principle he discovered to a thorough examination of the royal crown, striving to establish the truth. He first carefully weighed the crown in the air, and then carefully immersed it in water and weighed it again, measuring the slightest difference in the readings of the scales. This allowed him to calculate the exact density of the material from which the crown was made and compare it with the known density of pure gold, free from impurities. As a result of the experiments, he irrefutably proved that the crown contained impurities of cheaper metals, since its measured density was noticeably lower than the density of pure gold, which indicated the jeweler's deception. This instructive story clearly demonstrates the birth of the law of hydrostatics, which is now widely known as Archimedes' principle and is one of the fundamental laws of physics. According to this law, any body immersed in a liquid is acted upon by an upward buoyant force equal to the weight of the liquid displaced by that body, which explains many phenomena. The legend of the royal crown and the rapturous cry of Eureka have become a symbol of scientific discovery, emphasizing how simple observation and sharp intuition can help find an elegant and effective solution to a complex practical problem that requires a non-standard approach. This momentous occasion clearly shows how simple and commonplace observations from everyday life can lead to fundamental scientific discoveries that change our understanding of the world. Archimedes' principle simply and clearly explains why some objects float confidently on the surface of the water, while others, on the contrary, inevitably sink, plunging to the bottom. The essence of this law is that a body, completely or partially submerged in a liquid, is acted upon by a buoyant force equal to the weight of the liquid displaced by that body, which determines its behavior. To better understand this principle, imagine that you are carefully lowering an object, such as a light ball, into a container filled with water. When the ball is immersed in water, it displaces a certain volume of liquid, causing its level to rise slightly, becoming higher than before. The water displaced by the ball exerts pressure from below on it, trying to push it back to the surface, preventing it from immersing in the water. This upward force is called the buoyant force, or Archimedes' force. What will happen to this object next, whether it will sink or float, depends on the relationship between its weight and the volume of liquid it displaces, which determines the balance of forces. If the weight of the object is greater than the buoyant force created by the liquid it displaces, then it will inevitably sink, falling to the bottom, as happens with an ordinary stone, which has a high density. The stone is heavy enough, and the volume of water it displaces is simply not enough to create a buoyant force capable of holding it on the surface. If the weight of the object is less than or equal to the buoyant force, then it will float confidently on the surface of the liquid, like a wooden board, which displaces enough water so that the buoyant force successfully holds it on the surface, preventing it from sinking. Here is a simple example from everyday life. When a person lies down in a bathtub filled with water, then, immersing in the water, his body displaces it, and the water level in the bathtub rises noticeably. At the same time, the person feels lighter than on land, since the water creates an upward buoyant force that partially compensates for the weight of his body, creating a feeling of lightness. This fundamental principle underlies many phenomena that we observe in everyday life, and advanced technologies used in various fields of science and technology. It simply and clearly explains why huge ships, despite their impressive weight, confidently stay on the water and do not sink. Their special shape allows them to displace a huge amount of water sufficient for the buoyant force to successfully balance their mass, ensuring stability. The same applies to balloons filled with a light gas, such as helium. The gas inside the balloon displaces the surrounding air, and the resulting buoyant force causes the balloon to rise, overcoming gravity. Thus, Archimedes' principle is a key concept that helps us understand how different bodies interact with liquids and gases, determining their behavior. This outstanding discovery had a huge impact on the further development of engineering, shipbuilding, and many other fields of science and technology. opening new horizons. After Archimedes developed the fundamental principles of hydrostatics, which explained in detail the behavior of various bodies in liquids, he focused his efforts on an in-depth study of mechanics, seeking to expand his knowledge. His next significant contribution to science was the development of the theory of levers and blocks, simple but effective mechanical devices that could greatly facilitate the performance of heavy physical tasks, reducing the effort required. Archimedes discovered a crucial principle. A properly designed lever can amplify applied force many times over, allowing us to lift or move heavy objects. He observed that by skillfully positioning the fulcrum and choosing the right lever arm length, even a small force applied to one end of the lever could lift or shift a load many times heavier, demonstrating the device's effectiveness. This pivotal discovery led to his famous, now iconic phrase, "Give me a place to stand, and I shall move the earth," underscoring the power of science. This ingenious idea simply and clearly explained why levers work so effectively and became a vital component of mechanics, shaping its subsequent development. Archimedes vividly demonstrated how minimal effort can achieve significant results, making his research particularly valuable for practical applications, assisting people in various fields. Based on his deep knowledge of levers, Archimedes devised a sophisticated system of blocks known as a compound pulley or block and tackle, showcasing his ingenuity. This efficient system consisted of a combination of fixed and movable pulleys through which a strong rope was threaded, forming a complex structure. The compound pulley significantly reduced the force needed to lift heavy loads, making the task much easier and more feasible. The more pulleys used in the system, the easier it became to handle heavy weights, reducing the effort required. Such an effective mechanism proved indispensable for construction and the convenient transportation of various cargoes, simplifying complex tasks. Archimedes actively applied his scientific discoveries in practice, demonstrating their benefits. The levers and pulleys he developed were widely used in building construction, moving the heavy stone blocks needed for construction and creating powerful siege engines for warfare. Thanks to these ingenious mechanisms, construction work and military operations became much more efficient, saving time and resources. Archimedes' research into levers and pulleys not only explained the fundamental principles of mechanics underlying these devices, but also vividly demonstrated how scientific knowledge can significantly facilitate the solution of practical problems arising in various spheres of human activity. His groundbreaking discoveries have become a solid foundation for many modern technologies still actively used today, from simple hand tools to complex lifting mechanisms that amaze with their power. Archimedes was famed not only for his outstanding scientific discoveries, but also as a talented inventor who created effective and original machines to protect his native city of Syracuse from enemy attacks. During the long and bloody siege of the city by Roman forces from 214 to 212 BC, his brilliant engineering inventions played a key role in the successful defense, allowing the city to resist the enemy's onslaught for a long time. One of Archimedes' most important achievements in this area was the development and improvement of catapults and ballistae, which were highly accurate and had a long range. He developed significantly improved mechanisms for hurling heavy stones, sharp arrows, and other deadly projectiles over long distances, inflicting substantial damage on the enemy. Archimedes precisely calculated the optimal dimensions and angles of inclination for these formidable devices to maximize their accuracy and range, making them even more effective. Thanks to these powerful catapults, the city's brave defenders could effectively bombard approaching Roman ships and siege structures long before the enemies reached the city walls, thwarting their plans. Another amazing invention of Archimedes, which ancient sources mention with admiration, was a unique device known as the Claw of Archimedes, which struck terror into the enemy. It was a huge and complex crane, equipped with a sturdy hook or grab, cleverly used to lift the bows of enemy Roman ships as they dangerously approached the city walls, seeking to break through the defenses. The ships, lifted from the water, were then dropped back down with tremendous force, sustaining serious hull damage or completely capsizing, sinking to the bottom. The Romans, watching the operation of this formidable device with horror, were amazed by its unparalleled destructive power and its effectiveness in combating the enemy fleet. The most legendary and mysterious story associated with Archimedes is the use of so-called burning mirrors, capable of setting enemy ships on fire from a distance. It is believed that Archimedes designed a complex system of many metal mirrors, arranged at a certain angle, which reflected sunlight and focused it on Roman ships. The focused sunlight possessed enormous energy and could cause the rapid combustion of the wooden parts of the ships, turning them into flaming targets doomed to destruction. Although the reality of such a device is reasonably doubted by modern historians studying the life and work of Archimedes, the very idea of such an invention clearly demonstrates the impressive scale of Archimedes' engineering thinking, which was ahead of its time. In addition, Archimedes significantly improved the city's defensive walls, designing special mechanisms and traps that could effectively hinder the advance of siege towers or destroy enemy fortifications, causing them irreparable damage. His devices worked on the basis of simple but effective principles of levers and pulleys, making them both easy to use and extremely effective in combat. The defense of Syracuse, based on the ingenious inventions of Archimedes, lasted for more than 2 long years, demonstrating the resilience of the city and the talent of its defender. His machines not only significantly slowed the advance of Roman troops, but also instilled in them genuine fear and respect for the defender's ingenuity. Enemy soldiers were convinced that these incredible devices were created with magic, as they could not understand how they worked, marveling at their effectiveness. Although Syracuse ultimately fell to the superior forces of the enemy, Archimedes' invaluable contribution to the heroic defense of the city became a true legend, passed down from generation to generation. After developing effective inventions that helped reliably defend Syracuse from enemies, Archimedes focused his efforts on creating useful devices to solve practical problems in people's daily lives, making their work easier. One such widely known invention was the famous Archimedes' screw, designed to lift water from lower levels to higher ones, solving the problem of water supply. This simple but effective device proved so successful that its basic principles are still used today in various designs. The Archimedes screw is a spiral fixed inside an inclined tube, creating a unique channel for lifting water. One end of this simple device is immersed in water, and the other is raised at a slight angle, forming an inclined plane. When the screw starts to rotate, water is captured between the turns of the spiral and gradually rises up the tube, moving to the upper end. The device works because the rotation of the spiral creates a translational movement of water along the turns, effectively moving it upwards even with a slight inclination of the tube, making it convenient to use. This simple but extremely useful mechanism has proven indispensable in agriculture, construction, and other areas requiring water lifting. In ancient times, the Archimedes screw was actively used for irrigating fields, especially in regions with limited access to water resources, ensuring harvests. For example, in ancient Egypt, this device was widely used to lift water from the full-flowing Nile to fields where various agricultural crops were grown, ensuring food security. The Archimedes screw was also actively used to drain marshy areas and efficiently fill urban water supply systems, providing the population with clean water. In addition, this screw proved indispensable on ships, helping to quickly remove water from the holds and prevent flooding, ensuring safe navigation. Modern technologies have not lost interest in the fundamental principles underlying this ingenious invention, confirming its relevance. Today, the Archimedes screw is successfully used in wastewater treatment plants for the efficient lifting of sewage, in agriculture for irrigating fields, ensuring harvests, and even in modern hydropower, where it operates in reverse, generating electricity. Falling water rotates the screw, and its rotational movement is converted into useful electrical energy, demonstrating its versatility. This device has also been successfully adapted for the convenient and efficient transportation of bulk materials, such as grain or sand, in various industrial enterprises. Its amazing structural simplicity and high reliability in operation make it in demand even in the 21st century, confirming the ingenuity of the invention. After the greatest scientific discoveries and active participation in the heroic defense of Syracuse against Roman invaders, Archimedes' life tragically ended, leaving a deep mark on the history of science. His ingenious works and innovative inventions, which amazed the imagination of contemporaries, unfortunately could not protect him from the cruelty of war and violence. The fall of Syracuse in 212 BC became the last sad chapter in the life of this outstanding scientist, who revolutionized our understanding of the world. The Roman commander Marcellus, keenly aware of Archimedes' value as the greatest mind of his time, issued a strict order to his soldiers to spare his life, understanding the importance of his knowledge to science. However, in the chaos of the city's capture and looting, this important order was not carried out due to the confusion. According to a widespread legend, Archimedes, completely absorbed in his complex calculations, sat directly on the ground and enthusiastically drew geometric figures in the sand, paying no attention to what was happening around him, when a Roman soldier suddenly entered his home. The scholar, fully focused on solving his mathematical problems, did not even notice the sudden presence of the soldier, and without raising his head, calmly said to him, "Do not disturb my diagrams. They are very important." Possibly annoyed by his words, or simply not realizing who he was dealing with, the soldier, without thinking twice, killed Archimedes on the spot, committing an irreparable crime. This tragic episode clearly demonstrates how deeply Archimedes was devoted to science, placing it above all else. Even in the face of mortal danger, his mind remained immersed in complex reflections and enthusiastic study of the laws of nature, not distracted by the events occurring around him. For Archimedes, nothing was more important than his scientific research, even when chaos reigned and war raged, which speaks to his dedication. However, this sad story also clearly underscores the tragic contradiction between knowledge and the brute force that dominates the world. Marcellus, a man who understood the immense value of science and scientific knowledge, attempted to save Archimedes' life by giving the appropriate order. But his directive, unfortunately, could not stop the cruelty and misunderstanding of a simple soldier who did not realize the significance of science. The untimely death of the outstanding scientist became a tragic symbol of the vulnerability of knowledge in the face of raw physical power and human stupidity, which does not value intellect. The death of Archimedes was a huge and irreplaceable loss for the entire scientific community, mourning his passing. His innovative works have inspired generations of scientists, prompting them to new discoveries, and his name has forever become synonymous with human genius, embodying an outstanding mind. Archimedes' works, which laid a solid foundation for mechanics, mathematics, and physics, are rightly considered the greatest scientific achievement of the ancient world, defining its development. However, after the fall of the Roman Empire, they were under serious threat of extinction, risking being lost forever. Complex historical processes and the general decline of scientific thought in Europe for several centuries almost completely erased from people's memory the achievements of ancient scientists, consigning them to oblivion. Despite this, Archimedes' invaluable works were preserved thanks to the efforts of Byzantine and Arab scholars, who played a crucial role in their translation, adaptation, and dissemination throughout the world, preventing them from disappearing. After the destruction of many major scientific centers of the Western Roman Empire, valuable works by ancient authors, including the works of Archimedes, were forgotten or irretrievably lost, which was a tragedy for science. However, the Byzantine Empire, which continued to carefully preserve Greek culture and scientific knowledge, became the first reliable repository of his priceless works, protecting them from oblivion. Archimedes' scientific texts, such as On the Sphere and Cylinder, Measurement of a Circle, On Floating Bodies, and others, were carefully rewritten and carefully stored in the famous Library of Constantinople, becoming accessible to scholars. Byzantine scholars not only painstakingly rewrote, but also commented in detail on Archimedes' works, helping to preserve their original meaning and significance for future generations, passing on knowledge. However, Byzantium alone would not have been enough for Archimedes' knowledge to survive the centuries full of upheaval and war. Arab scholars made a decisive contribution to the preservation of his works, showing great interest in science. From the 8th century onward, during the Golden Age of Islam, the Arab world became a major center of science and culture, attracting scholars from all over the world. Caliphs of the mighty Abbasid Caliphate, such as the enlightened Al-Ma'mun, actively organized large-scale translations of ancient texts from Greek and Syriac into Arabic, seeking to preserve knowledge for posterity. The famous Baghdad House of Wisdom, known as Beit al-Hikmah, became the main scientific center of that time, where the works of Archimedes, along with the works of Euclid, Aristotle, and other great thinkers, were carefully collected, translated, and studied. Particular attention was paid to Archimedes' works on mathematics and mechanics, which were considered very important. Arab scholars, such as al-Kindi and al-Khazini, not only translated his scientific works into Arabic, but also actively developed them, contributing to science. For example, al-Khazini, inspired by Archimedes' profound research in the field of hydrostatics, wrote his own scientific works in which the principles of the buoyancy of various bodies in liquids were examined in detail, expanding and supplementing his theory. Translations of Archimedes' works were often accompanied by detailed commentaries that carefully explained the complex aspects of ancient texts, making them accessible to a wider audience interested in science. These skillfully executed Arabic translations became a kind of bridge across which Archimedes' valuable knowledge successfully passed from the era of antiquity to the Middle Ages, and then, centuries later, returned to Europe, enriching its scientific thought. In the 12th century, Europe began to experience a period of scientific revival, known in history as the era of scholasticism, when interest in science was rekindled. Scientific works by ancient scholars, translated by Arab scholars into Arabic, began to gradually return to the West through Spain and Sicily, which at that time were important centers of cultural exchange between the Christian and Muslim worlds, contributing to the spread of knowledge. Latin translators, such as Gerard of Cremona, actively translated Archimedes' works from Arabic into Latin, returning them to European universities, where they began to study science again. At this time, the works of Archimedes became the basis for the study of mathematics and mechanics in universities, shaping students' scientific worldview. His works inspired such prominent scientists as Leonardo Fibonacci, who successfully applied Archimedes' methods to his own mathematical research, and Roger Bacon, who showed great interest in his experimental approaches in science. Archimedes' works were particularly highly valued during the Renaissance, when European scholars began to directly consult the Greek originals, studying them in their original language. Surviving copies of the Greek texts, carefully preserved in Byzantium, played an important role in this process, providing scholars with access to primary sources. For example, Archimedes' unique work, The Method of Mechanical Theorems, containing his innovative discoveries in the field of integral calculus, was discovered only in 1906 in the form of a palimpsest, but even in the Middle Ages, his brilliant ideas on hydrostatics and mechanics were actively studied and applied in practice. Archimedes' works became an integral part of the formation of scientific thought in Europe, exerting a huge influence on its development. His important discoveries in the field of mechanics inspired not only medieval scholars, but also the great minds of the New Age, such as Galileo and Newton, who made a real scientific revolution. Galileo highly appreciated the principles of levers and hydrostatics developed by Archimedes, and Newton effectively used his innovative methods in creating his world-famous theories that changed science. The story of the preservation of Archimedes' works is a vivid example of how valuable knowledge can be successfully transmitted through various civilizations and eras without losing its relevance. Arab scholars, who served as reliable custodians of ancient wisdom, and European translators, who returned this priceless knowledge to the West, ensured Archimedes' scientific immortality, preserving his name in history. His brilliant ideas, which have passed through the centuries, continue to inspire science today, reminding us of how one name can connect entire epochs and different cultures, contributing to the development of humanity.